That was a whole summer growing that thing, and my kids loved it because, whenever they wanted my attention, they would literally grab it and yank my head around and yank my head back. But yeah, it took a little while to grow it out. It took four
Preparation.
months. 4 months. Yeah. Oh, and the funniest thing, I shot everything and I was editing while I would shoot because I was, even then, this is before pre-pandemic, but I was fairly sure we weren't going to get a chance to come back and reshoot stuff. So I wanted to make sure I had everything all along. So the day I finished, which was for the Christmas vacation, we started in October. We shot all my stuff first. So the day we finished, I went in and I shaved the whole thing off. No chance of a reshoot. No, I was like, get this thing off of me because it had begun to have a life of its own. There was some of my children left their toys there. I gave it to the makeup and hair department, and I shaved it off so that it all stayed in one piece, and then I put it on some stickum so it would stay there in case for some reason there was a reason to go back. I didn't want to have to do one of those bad fake pirate beards. But I kept the one from Syriana in a thing for a while, and it literally turns to it becomes one of the funkiest things your housekeeper could ever find. Well, you have an advantage. When I did ER, I played a pediatrician on the show, and so I worked with just hundreds of kid actors. So I sort of had some understanding of it. But on the show, I was like a womanizer and a drunk and all these things. And I could do all of those things. I didn't have to sort of wink that I was a good guy because I would always, at the end of the day, save the kid, And so people would go, he's a good guy. So you could get away with kind of anything. So when I read the script, I thought, the fun part about this part is that you don't have to sort of make him in any way likable necessarily. You don't have to. You can be sort of really ticked off about the situation and or lost without having to bring in any of that energy because all along you're also protecting this young girl. When we first started, I talked to Netflix and I said, look, I think we have to talk about the idea that in the world, as we see all of this anger and hatred, not just in the United States, but this divisiveness all around the world. In England, you have it, and certainly in go down the list, And I said, if you play this out, it's not inconceivable. It's not a science fiction that we can destroy ourselves by 2049. That's not an inconceivable thing at all, And so that was sort of my pitch. And then the pandemic hit after we wrapped, and it sort of changed exactly what we were, in a way. Then it became much more about our inability to communicate, our inability to touch and to be near one another, and that loss. And it's funny how real that became, and how we suddenly understand this lack of being near one another, and our need to do that. Well, there is an act that, the idea was, if you stopped it just before the end, it's a film about regret, right? If you stop it before you end at the very end, it's about not fulfilling your life. And I do believe that in general, probably one of the worst things that could happen, I've seen it with older people who have not fulfilled, never tried to do the things that they thought they could have done, and are filled with regret. And aging is a very difficult thing for them because they didn't do it. Regret's a very powerful, infuriating element. But to me, this one was all about redemption. And there is redemption in this, and that redemption washes over us, But, by the end, when you find out, now that since everybody here has seen it, we don't have to worry about spoilers. When you find out that I'm not just trying to save mankind by I'm trying to save my daughter, who I never showed up for. And there's something very, it's important to always personalize stories. When I would you go to Darfur and you talk about 300,000 people are dead. Well, that's a number and people can't consume it. Yeah. But if you talk about one person and you show their struggle, it's much different. And so it's much more about sort of isolating this into a smaller story in a big landscape, which it was a big landscape, Iceland and space. we scouted in the summer, and it was, like you said, it was beautiful. We took the snowmobiles out onto the glacier, and it was stunning. But we got there in mid-October, and it'll wake you up a little bit. Then we'd have gusts of about 70 miles an hour, which would get to like 40 degrees below zero, and it was, it was properly cold, which is helpful actually as an actor, because elements actually help us. As a director, it's a mother to do, because it's like we had a pretty reduced crew, but it'd be completely clear. You could see 1,000 miles. It's gorgeous. And we'd wait for the wind gusts to come, and you could see these walls of snow coming in, and we all go like, all right, everybody get ready. And then, and we were all tied to each other. We had strings. So, because you could get lost, you can't see your hand in front of your face, and and the camera guy's holding the camera, and you're just trying to get, a minute, good luck, 30 seconds of a shot inside this, and then after about 30 seconds, like 45 seconds or so, my eyelids would freeze shut, and we'd have to go in with a blow dryer and blow my eyelashes apart so I could go back out and shoot. We, from the very beginning, I talked with the composer, with Alexander Desplat, who's just and a dear friend. And I said, you're going to write more music than you've ever written for a movie. And he's like, I am? And I was like, you are. And then I said, this is going to be, we've taken out a lot of dialogue, because the truth is, for me, my character, if the little girl isn't going to talk, what am I going to say? There isn't going to be as much dialogue. So we're going to have to tell the story with music, which makes it feel more dreamlike and feels more, it gives it, and then I said, okay, so we're going to have this scene with this blood. And I said, but the blood is going to be moving like a ballet. The blood itself floating is going to be like a ballet. And, he can't see it because we haven't done the effects yet while he's writing the music. And he's like, a ballet of blood? And I go, a ballet of blood. And then he goes, okay. And he wrote this extraordinary piece of music. And so I relied a lot on the storytelling on this one, on the music sort of taking over. And in a way to, it's a meditation, this film. It's not there are a couple of set pieces that have action in them. But in general, it's a meditation on what we're capable of doing to one another, and also, the good in us, fight to survive that we still have. It was interesting. The original script was that Maya, Tiffany's character, runs out of air. But since that's happened, gravity, we did it, and that happened to Sandy in the film. So we were like, well, we can't do that. So I was watching all of these films of all these astronauts up in the air, and they would do this thing where they would squirt out a drink, and it would just float in bubbles, and then they would drink it, out of these bubbles. And I just said, well, what if she just, what if she bleeds out? What if we have blood going out? And the minute I said that to the effects guys, they're like, ooh, wow, that's crazy. And, and they really embraced the idea of, I didn't want it to be gruesome in a weird way. It is, terrifying, but it's, there's something sort of poetic about it, at least, that it's sort of, that we follow this blood all the way out as we leave the chamber and stuff. So, the first thing you have to do when you're going to go out there, we have a couple of things working against us, besides the weather that that you're just at the mercy. But one is that we're shooting in late October, so we only have about, light comes up at 11:30, goes down at about 3:30, and you also have a little girl who's 7 who has an hour, a particular time, Kaylin. She has a particular amount of time that she can shoot in. And so I boarded everything. I was really ready for it. And we had a really small crew. We'd grab camera boxes and run out into a spot. But there's a lot of other tricks to it. You can't just run and do something, because, it's got this covering of snow over what could be a 200-foot drop in the middle, as you've probably been out there on those things. There are very specific places you can go. And we go, well, I'd like to shoot up there because the light is great. And we see that. We kind of walk with them. The guys would go, no, don't go through that. And they, show you that could drop for, So it wasn't as it really had to be planned out. You know, we really,
Mm-hmm.
then we had to, and then we relied on the wind, because the wind did everything for us. The wind gave us um, the snow, you know, because it really wasn't a snowstorm. It's just wind blowing the snow that made it, you know, that blocked out everything and made it all white. And so you were wait for it. At the times we had ritters out there in the middle of, you know, nowhere. It's like, that's going to help, you know. And we ended up having to fill in about 6 or 7 shots on a stage, and digitally fill it in. A couple of shots we didn't get, but you can't tell which ones they are. And you know, that was there was a lot of help with the effects guys to make sure. There was a couple of shots we couldn't get. We just didn't, you know, we ran out of time and ran out of wind. So Mark wrote the screenplay for Netflix, and they sent it to me to act in it. And I loved the part. I thought this is a really good part. And then you know, they didn't have a director attached. And I said, look, I think I have a take on this. I've done a couple of space films, you know, with a couple of maestros, you know, with Alfonso and Steven Soderbergh. And I said, I think I know what this story is. There was a movie long ago, and we put a little clip of it in our movie with Gregory Peck, called On the Beach.
Yeah.
And I thought that this was sort of a modern telling of On the Beach, which was on the beach, there'd been the nuclear exchange, because at the time we were all only dealing with the idea of the end of mankind from a nuclear exchange. And everyone had died except Australia. And everybody ends up in Australia, and the nuclear cloud is coming. So they're going to die. And so it's coming to terms with the end of the world and your own death. And it's pretty nihilistic, and everybody dies at the end. And so it doesn't have sort of the same ability for some hope, but it had a lot of those elements of coming to terms with what we've done and what we're capable of doing, and finding kindness and compassion and love in, you know, acts of kindness. I thought that, you know, Kyle and Demian's characters, you know, when originally they were written much younger, and I just said, let's get older guys. Older guys has a little more heft to it. And I said to them, I want you to be the old men in the Muppets in the balcony. I want them to have fun and really have some experience and know each other, so that when things go wrong, there's an understanding between them. When Demian says, I'd like to take a ride home with my buddy, you know, that it has a real emotional, you know, moment to it. And it's about love and caring and understanding, you know, that they're probably not going to make it. And then the other element that sort of came into this was magical, was Felicity calling me and saying she was pregnant. I was in Iceland shooting, and Felicity, who's probably here because it's a premiere, Felicity called me and said, I have some news. She didn't say good news or bad news. She just had news. And she said, I'm pregnant. And, you know, there was not even a pause, because I'm not dumb. I immediately said, congratulations. That is so exciting for you. We're all very excited for you. And then there was a long pause. And it's like, so what do you want to do? And she says, I can do it. I can go on the wires. I've talked to the stunt guy. I'm ready to do it. And I'm like, we're not going to put you on the wires. I mean, we're not going to do that. Let's figure it out. So our first step was we tried to shoot it without acknowledging it. We tried to do head replacements and shoot around it, and, you know, and all of that. We did that for a couple of days. And, you know, I don't know if you've ever done those kind of shoots, but they really do take the energy out of the room and take the energy out of the actors, you know. And she was trying desperately not to look pregnant, and it all of it just felt like
your breath.
Hold your breath, stuck in your gut. And, you know, she was visibly pregnant, you know. And so, you know, I woke up in the middle of the night and I just said, you know what? They go away for 2 years, you know, people have sex, you know. So she got pregnant. And once we decided that she was pregnant and leaned into it and said, okay, well, if she's pregnant, then we can have the guys trying to name her. We can build this we built this ultrasound machine in a day. It was you know, I can't remember what it was, but, you know, went to Jim Bissell, the production designer. I said, I need something that we could fake as an ultrasound machine. And we quickly put together a scene for her and for she and Tiffany to do this sort of beautiful scene where she holds her hand. And the reason we loved that scene suddenly was because they're listening for anything, any sign of life. That's all they're waiting for, is any sign of life. And finally, the only sign of life they have is from Felicity. And it just felt sort of beautiful. And it led to the ending, which now feels like it should have always been there. She was, we read, literally a couple hundred girls, and they were all great, and they all had something really unique. But Kaylin showed up. And first of all, yes, she has these extraordinary eyes. That's just magical. So I would say, okay, you're running away from me as the ice is breaking, and turn around and give me your scared face. And she would do and she would do this thing, which is hard to do for any actor. And she would nail it. And I'm not kidding at all when I tell you that Kaylin, at least 50%, probably more, of everything I did with her was one take. Literally one take. And we didn't have the ability. She probably saved us 5 days of shooting on the schedule, because we'd scheduled for, there to be tricks with having to use someone younger and stuff. She put all of us, the rest of us, David and I would look over at her at times. I'd be talking and say, she's putting us to shame, because she really did. She was like, it all just came so naturally. There's a scene where we're just sitting in the chairs looking up at Polaris. And it's just supposed to be a really quiet moment. And quiet moments are hard to fill with a kid, because they're trying to fill it, She just sat there, and I said, look, that's Polaris. She looks up at it, and then I said, you see it? She looks up, and then she looks over, and she goes, and she nods her head. And you think, man, that's great acting. And it's just it. So we were really lucky that we found her along the way. And I love when we were out in the ice, we saw this beautiful shot. We saw this beautiful frame where the wind was blowing over the top of this ice, and it was sort of backlit, and it was just stunning. And I go, let's go dig a hole over there and get inside the thing, and, pull her down in it. And she's in there just digging away, at the snow, trying to do it. And, she was, she's a little Irish girl. She's tough. She's out in very, very cold, hard winds, and she could hang. It was, but everybody to a T, I know we have to finish up. Everybody to a T came to this with exactly the right attitude, which is that, we're all in this together, and we're going to work it out. Everybody had great ideas that made the film better, which is always nice. The people who were involved, from cinematography to production design, everybody, I just said, give me your best. And they did. The visual effects guys were doing stuff they'd never done before. And the space stuff, the space stuff was interesting, because I looked at all these space films, and Alfonso arguably did the best sort of physical version of that with Gravity, in terms of, going outside. So when we were out of Gravity, I kept saying, why is that so good? And it was because Alfonso, there is no north or south in space, because there is no north or south. You're constantly moving. So the idea was to keep the camera rotating like he did, but not so much that you make everybody throw up, which is it is a trick, and so you're constantly battling these demons along the way. But everybody came into it. Martin, the cinematographer, really had a beautiful plan, and we worked on it for a long time. And I have to say, it was nothing but a pleasure to do.